You're listening to the SSPX podcast, and welcome to episode 46 of the Crisis in the Church series. Today, we're joined by Father McFarland to discuss the other groups that commonly say the traditional Latin Mass known as the Ecclesia Dei Communities, since they were formed after the decree of Pope John Paul II by the same name. Among traditional Catholics, there seems to be a lot of confusion about why there's this division between the Society of Saint Pius X and these groups. On the surface, both look identical. Both say the Latin Mass. Both are orthodox in their sacraments and teaching. The priests wear cassocks, etc. So what's the problem with the Fraternity of Saint Peter or the Institute of Christ the King and all the others? Is it just a traditional Catholic version of a big feud like the Hatfields and McCoys? Father McFarland explains why, objectively, there is a difference. Right now on the SSPX podcast. Welcome to the SSPX podcast and our next episode in the Crisis in the Church series, welcoming Father McFarland from Our Lady of Sorrows again. Hi, Father. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well, Andrew. How about you?
Doing all right. Thank you. Today we are talking about someone other than the Society of Saint Pius X. For the last few episodes, we've been talking about the SSPX and is it legitimate? Can we go to these masses? All of these sorts of questions. Today we're going to be looking at a different group or a grouping of groups. And that is the Ecclesia Dei Communities. Why talk about someone else at this point in this series, Father?
Because of a perceived resemblance between the Society of Saint Pius X and these groups. So they are groups that have the traditional Latin Mass. They do have many of the traditions of the Church in their daily life and so on. And the question comes up, well, why not those groups? Why the Society of Saint Pius X? These groups have an official standing in regard to the authorities in Rome. The Society of Saint Pius X doesn't. Therefore, it seems like they're better. Right. That we should go with them instead of with the Society, who does not have that official approval.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, obviously, you're going to be speaking from the point of view of the Society of Saint Pius X. You are an SSPX priest.
Right.
So I think right off the bat, there's going to be some criticism about this episode where people are going to say, well, Father, you're just being a homer. You're just talking about the SSPX because you just want to protect your turf. Is that what you're going to be doing?
Right. And making myself unpopular at the same time.
Right, exactly. Right.
At least with a certain groups of people. No, it's not that at all. My point is not to attack persons. This isn't a personal thing. For those people who are listening who are in any way attached to these different groups that we label the Ecclesia Dei Communities, for those who have no dog in this fight at all, I would just ask them to listen to the actual arguments, the points that are being made from as objective a point of view as possible. I'm sure that there are plenty of wonderful priests and religious and faithful in and around these groups. And it's not my point to say that there aren't, or that everyone who belongs to one of these groups is going to hell. I'm not saying that, but my point is going to be that their response to the present crisis in the Church is not the right one. Okay. And I hold the position of the Society of Saint Pius X, not because I was born into this association with them. I found the traditional Mass in the Society at the age of nearly 22. And I went with the Society and I entered the Society seminary because I believed then, as I still do, certainly even more forcefully now, that the Society's response to the crisis in the Church is the only consistent and coherent one.
Okay. So this is a good time to talk about this topic. This is a time of some tremendous confusion. There's a lot of confusion. I keep thinking back to the time before you and I were born, Father. It was pretty easy to know right from wrong. It was pretty easy to know, all right, the Catholic Church says this, we do this. But now we faithful, and probably even you priests in some regard are kind of left, all right, do I follow this? Do I do this? So at this point, it's difficult for many of the faithful to kind of figure out who to follow.
Right. And I think that there is, on that account, we need to be understanding and patient with one another. but we do need to found our decisions on principles and not on our feelings or on any sort of appearances. We have to keep in mind that all human authority is limited, is subordinate to God's authority. So consequently, when any authority, even the highest authorities in the church, even the Pope, are in contradiction to what's been commanded by God, we have an obligation to resist what that authority is trying to make us do that is opposed to God's law. And the church's law is not an end in itself. It doesn't exist for the sake of existing. There is no principle that outside of canon law, there is no salvation. That does not exist. And in fact, that law itself foresees circumstances, situations where the ordinary application of the letter of the law will not be possible. We call those states of necessity. And that law says that the salvation of souls is the highest law. So that's a perennial Catholic principle applied to canon law. It's even been made a part of the 1983 Code of Canon Law. I mean, the whole purpose is to save souls. If adherence to the letter of the law is not saving souls, then it's not doing its job, and the law needs to be set aside in that particular case, particularly if it's militating against the salvation of souls. Just like if you're driving someone with a mortal wound to the hospital, you scrupulously obey the speed limit, right? Because that's opposed to the purpose of the law.
Right.
So if in a given situation, canon law, they'll find the letter of canon law impedes the salvation of souls, well, then we don't adhere to the letter.
So let's dive into some of these groups. And I guess we can start by saying that the Ecclesia Dei groups, again, we're calling Ecclesia Dei groups that generally say the traditional Latin Mass, follow the traditional sacraments, all of this sort of thing, but have an official capacity within the Catholic Church. And these groups have been in the news again recently.
Right. And we should point out that it's a convenient term, sure. The Ecclesia Dei Communities and so on, that has been taken from the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, which formerly oversaw these groups on behalf of Rome. That commission was dissolved by Pope Francis, so it doesn't really apply anymore. Nevertheless, we keep the name simply for convenience sake. Everybody knows what we're talking about. Right. And they have been in the news again, particularly with the motu proprio Traditiones Custodes in July, back in July of this year, which Pope Francis issued, limiting the use of the traditional Mass, imposing onerous conditions on continuing to say the traditional Mass, and especially trying to impede any further spread of the use of the Missal of 1962.
Right.
In the letter that accompanies that motu proprio, Pope Francis says, "But I'm nonetheless saddened that the instrumental use of Missale Romanum of 1962 is often characterized by a rejection not only of the liturgical form, but of the Vatican Council II itself, claiming with unfounded and unsustainable assertions that it betrayed tradition and the quote-unquote true church. The path of the church must be seen within the dynamic of tradition, which originates with the apostles and progresses in the church with the assistance of the Holy Spirit." And that last clause is a quotation of the Vatican II document Dei Verbum, which we'll return to later. And in this document, to a certain extent, Pope Francis is clarifying the situation. Right? We're dealing with really two different conceptions of the Catholic faith. One that we hold in the Society of St. Pius X is that Catholic faith is unchanging and unchangeable. The other, changing continuously to correspond with mankind's experience, right? Which is a principle that's the very heart of modernism. The idea of religious experience and the evolution of that experience and the consequent evolution of dogma, totally changing the meaning of that term. And then, you have had, especially since the pontificate of Benedict XVI, but even before that, this hermeneutic of continuity. We're going to square the circle and have both conceptions of tradition of the faith at the same time, and it really doesn't work. Okay, and then so you have this letter which is presenting the Missal of 1962 as in itself being opposed to that conception of the church where the faith evolves. And we would say, yeah, that it is opposed to that, and that's a good thing. The response from these Ecclesia Dei groups was rather different. They wrote a letter to the French bishops on the subject of this motu proprio and its accompanying letter that was dated August 31st of this year. And I would say the letter that they wrote, their response, throws into very clear relief the problems with the Ecclesia Dei mentality. Right. In it, they say, we affirm our adherence to the magisterium, including that of Vatican II and what follows according to the Catholic doctrine of the assent due to it. There's a qualifier there, kind of an escape hatch, but they are reaffirming their adherence to Vatican II and what follows. That sentiment is a problem, and indicates the main problem with these congregations, with these institutes. They go on to beg for a mediator. They protest that they feel marginalized and oppressed, and they want to enter into dialogue with the church authorities. They're effectively asking for a peaceful coexistence. Let them continue to have their traditional mass in the midst of the world of the Novus Ordo, which they're effectively saying, we're not complaining about, no big deal, just keep letting us do our
just let
thing.
Us have our little pocket of traditional Latin Mass, and we could ignore all the rest.
Right. And the question then becomes, well, is the church actually in a crisis? Is Vatican II a major reason for that crisis? Are there a lot of things in the post-conciliar documents that are at odds with what has always been taught by the church? And does that Novus Ordo Mass express the Catholic faith regarding the Holy Sacrifice, or does it represent, both as a whole and in its details, a striking departure from the Catholic theology of the Mass as it was formulated in Session 22 of the Council of Trent, and so on? Right? Is it possible to, in good conscience, to pretend that there are no dangerous problems in the church so that we can continue to have official approval?
Right. I mean, and we've been looking at this over the last 45 episodes, Father, and especially in the first episode that you and I did back about a year ago. There's a crisis in the church. There's a problem in the church. And I mean, are priests and the hierarchy in these Ecclesia Dei groups, are they recognizing that? Do they see that?
I don't see how they couldn't. But seeing it as one thing, and then your public reaction to it is another thing. So they're effectively, if they're seeing it, then they're expressing a certain willingness to keep quiet about it, or to turn a blind eye to it, so that they can continue to have their little traditional pocket, continue to do their traditional thing. So what's more important? Adherence to the truth, the reality, or continue to have approval, having that letter of the law canonical standing.
Let's, I guess we can dive into the history a little bit, Father, unless I'm cutting you off on something else. But there are multiple groups within this broader community that we're calling the Ecclesia Dei groups. Where did they all start? Who are the bigger players in it?
Well, I think the principal one that we can kind of focus on is the Fraternity of Saint Peter. They're the oldest, the largest of the Ecclesia Dei institutes. And the recent letter of the Superior General shows that they're all pretty much on the same page as far as the big principles go. Anyway, so in the interests of not spending forever on this particular podcast, and perhaps a little bit of an oversimplification, but not too much. I think at the point we still get the point across. And they began in 1988. So from 1975, when you had the suppression of the SSPX by the Roman authorities, that until 1988, there was no congregation approved by Rome that was dedicated to the use of the traditional Roman liturgy in the church. So the SSPX and our allies were really at that time the only show in town. And we can mention that the founding members of the Fraternity of Saint Peter were members of the Society of Saint Pius X at that time. And while it was, quote unquote, suppressed, so it had no legal canonical standing at that time for those 13 or so years. And it is significant that Archbishop Lefebvre is really the single-handedly preserving these traditions of the church, her liturgy, her doctrine, and so on. Certainly in maintaining any kind of international association, international presence of these great treasures of the church. 1988, of course, is, as I think you've looked at with Bishop Fillet, the famous Episcopal consecrations, 4 bishops consecrated by Archbishop Lefebvre with the assistance of Bishop de Castro-Meyer at Ecom. Just a couple days later, on July 2nd of 1988, John Paul II issued a document, Ecclesia Dei Afflicta. So a couple of words in that sound pretty familiar. Ecclesia Dei Afflicta, so the Church of God afflicted. And it declared that Archbishop Lefebvre, by this act of consecrating bishops, had excommunicated himself, and the 4 bishops likewise excommunicated themselves, and charged them all with schism. And it's out of this document that we have the formation of these new groups, beginning with the Fraternity of Saint Peter, dedicated to the saying of the traditional Latin Mass, with the formal approval of Rome. So the document is quite significant for a number of reasons, but for our present conversation, John Paul II wrote, "The root of this schismatic act can be discerned in an incomplete and contradictory notion of tradition. Incomplete because it does not take sufficiently into account the living character of tradition, which, as the Second Vatican Council clearly taught, comes from the apostles and progresses in the church with the help of the Holy Spirit." Okay, that's that same part of Dei Verbum quoted by Pope Francis. Okay. And it continues on from there, the quotation. "There is a growth and insight into the realities and words that are being passed on. This comes about in various ways. It comes through the contemplation and study of believers who ponder these things in their hearts. It comes from the intimate sense of spiritual realities which they experience, and it comes from the preaching of those who have received, along with their right of succession in the episcopate, the sure charism of truth." So it's this notion of living tradition. So evolving tradition, evolving Catholic faith. Right? It's a modernist phrase that means changing tradition. Okay, so no longer a deposit of faith, but a constantly changing and evolving body of experiences. And it's precisely this idea that's used to justify all the modern changes. The old ways of doing things, they don't speak to modern man anymore. Modern man has, these ridiculous phrases has come of age and so on. And so we need to make a childish liturgy for him. Of course. But that's another discussion. In this document, Ecclesia Dei Afflicta, you have these very problematic errors that come out of the Second Vatican Council reiterated. Here's John Paul II again. "Indeed, the extent and depth of the teaching of the Second Vatican Council call for a renewed commitment to deeper study in order to reveal clearly the Council's continuity with tradition." Right? We have to study more so that we can figure out how this actually jives with tradition somehow. "Especially in points of doctrine which, perhaps because they are new, have not been well understood by some sections of the church. Perhaps because they are new." He says that. Right? New points of doctrine, that's an impossibility. Right. You have a deposit of faith that remains the same. It can be explained in new ways. It can that the understanding can become more perfect, but it cannot change, and nothing can be added to that. As a illustration of what the church always taught, on the subject, here's Vatican I. The doctrine of faith which God revealed has been entrusted as a divine deposit to the spouse of Christ, to be faithfully guarded and infallibly interpreted. Hence also that understanding of its sacred dogmas must be perpetually retained, which Holy Mother Church has once declared, and there must never be recession from that meaning under the specious name of a deeper understanding. Right, so that's quite in contradiction with what John Paul II is saying. So this document, from which was named the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei, which until recently oversaw these communities and in turn gave them the name by which they're widely known and by which we're calling them, teaches a new and erroneous notion of tradition.
So an objection would be here, Father, well, you're just cherry picking a document. The groups may be perfectly fine. It's just because, there's this document that set up this commission. It doesn't mean that everyone within the commission is bad.
Right. Well, and it's not, you mean under the commission? Yeah. So that might be the case, except it begins this movement. And the Fraternity of Saint Peter, in their very constitution, so the governing documents of their institute, recognize that Ecclesia Dei Afflicta is at the origin of their foundation. Okay. And then that they are founded in the spirit of the apostolic letter Ecclesia Dei Afflicta. That's a quote. The Fraternity of Saint Peter is founded in the spirit of the apostolic letter Ecclesia Dei Afflicta. Okay. So it's not just what the Society of St. Pius X does with official approval. It's something fundamentally different. The price of that approval has been compromise on the level of principle. And that compromise is built into the founding documents of the Institute. Accepting the ideas of living tradition and, the hermeneutic of continuity at the root of their foundation. And we see the same compromise in the recent letter of the Superiors General to the bishops of France, professing their adherence to Vatican II. So this is a, we're talking about the fraternity specifically here, but all of these communities, they are under this spirit of the living tradition, and therefore, because that's how they were founded, everything else is going to flow from that, even if they look and sound somewhat similar. Right, and I'm not saying that all of them are even adhering to these ideas of living tradition, but it's built into their constitutions. It's built into their way of life from the very beginning. So they're at least publicly adhering to these particular errors, while they may at the same time be privately rejecting them. Right. It doesn't quite work. So you can't do that. Right? There's a fundamental and unacceptable compromise there. We'll appear to accept things that cannot be accepted, but then more or less ignore them. It's not the right approach, and these errors are sapping the life of the church to simply even give the appearance of going along with them, as if there's nothing wrong with them, as if they have some kind of value for souls and the life of the church. It is a compromise that's unacceptable. Okay. So where should we turn next, Father? We saw some of the history here, but do these groups accept everything that Vatican II has taught? I mean, the quote that you gave here at the beginning seems to indicate that they do, but in practice, are they? And I would say, probably not in practice. And I don't have any personal firsthand experience with the Fraternity of Saint Peter and so on. But from what I understand, the preaching among them is generally quite orthodox. They have traditional devotions. They maintain the traditional liturgy, of course. So they are on point, clearly at odds with this new conception of things. But again, it's a matter of principle that does also play out in practical consequences, even if not always and all the time. Mm-hmm. So, for example, their former superior general Father John Berg, in an interview that he gave to the Remnant newspaper in 2007, said that it was the mission given to the Fraternity of Saint Peter at its very foundation to show the continuity of religious liberty, ecumenism, and collegiality with the Church's tradition. And quotation is, so the question from the interviewer is it a mission of the FSSP or of specific FSSP theologian priests to attempt to show the hermeneutic of continuity with certain difficult passages of the Second Vatican Council in the light of tradition? For instance, religious liberty, ecumenism, collegiality, and interreligious dialogue. Answer: this is a mission that was given to the fraternity from the protocol at its very foundation. And these same comments repeated in conferences given in Lexington, Kentucky in 2011, Charlotte, North Carolina in 2013, and maybe elsewhere. But and I think as we've seen in this series, those concepts, religious liberty, ecumenism, collegiality, they are not reconcilable with tradition.
Right.
So to accept that is to agree to do something impossible, and something, again, that works against the good of the Church and works against the truth itself. Furthermore, they're put into this box of maintaining the Church's liturgical traditions and so on, right? Not because there's anything wrong with the new stuff, but because it's their charism. It's because of their particular way to serve the Church, and not because of any doctrinal objections. Again, officially, I'm sure there are plenty of fraternity priests who personally hold doctrinal objections. But again, the document in whose spirit their congregation was founded merely mentions a desire to protect the feelings of all those who are attached to the Latin liturgical tradition. Okay, this is a sort of preference-based policy, if you will, and confirmed by John Paul II on the 10th anniversary of Ecclesia Dei Afflicta, when he expressed what his intention was in issuing the document. And he says, while confirming the good based on the liturgical form wished by the Second Vatican Council and initiated by Pope Paul VI, the Church grants also a sign of understanding to those persons attached to certain previous liturgical and disciplinary norms. So there's nothing wrong with the new stuff, but we can give something to people who like the old stuff. And the Fraternity of Saint Peter has effectively, and the other Ecclesia Dei congregations have effectively accepted that position.
Right.
Right. They didn't say, no, Holy Father, that's not what we're trying to do. We have serious doctrinal objections.
Right.
Right? They're putting themselves, again, at least publicly, in that position imposed upon them by the Church.
As we're talking about this, I'm reminded of a sermon you gave about a year and a half ago, and it's actually up on this same YouTube channel right now. And I think the title of your sermon was, "We're not just here for the pretty mass." And that was kind of your whole point of, we're not just here because we prefer this mass. It's not a preference. And we've mentioned that a few times in this whole series as well.
Right. Well, it is a preference, but that's not the point.
Right.
It is a lot more beautiful. It has
sure,
many wonderful things but there's something much more than that. Right. This is a perfect expression of our faith, and the Novus Ordo is not. Right. It undermines that faith. All right. And really, we should even, a traditional Catholic should be defined as one who has a principled objection to the novelties introduced to the Church, which he judges to be a danger to the faith. It's not just a matter of liking a more beautiful liturgy, but, well, when it's not available, I'll just go to the Novus Ordo, or this one's closer to my house, or whatever. No, there are principles at work here. It's not just that one is better than the other. It's that one is good and the other is not. Right.
So, they are doing, and again, we're painting with a really broad brush here. And there are definitely priests who are doing some good things. There are some good fruits that are coming out of this. But is the fraternity and these other Ecclesia Dei groups, are they providing an appropriate response to the crisis, or a good enough response to the crisis?
And that's my whole point here is no, they're not. And they're forced also to avoid any criticism of the new Mass, they permit their members to proclaim the doctrinal integrity of a liturgical form of the liturgical reform to the faithful, without any repercussions. Whereas if I did such a thing, I would certainly be getting a phone call at the very least. Yep. Maybe packing my bags. This implied acceptance of living tradition, it's at the origin of all of these groups, and that's a very serious problem. In a sense, they're kind of, whether they intend to or not, and I don't think they do intend to, they're incarnating the hermeneutic of continuity. They are living tradition, right? We can have both. Right? We can have the pretty stuff, the solemn high mass and the Gregorian chant and the incense, but also we can take advantage of whatever parts of the new thing that we like, or we can all be part of the same work for the church, combining the elements of these two things, one traditional and the other not.
Right.
Okay. So they're combining within themselves the liturgical synthesis of the unchanging faith, and again, whether they intend to or not, the doctrinal synthesis, the doctrinal ideas that made that liturgy change. Mm-hmm. And again, you can't do it. There's a fundamental opposition. Right.
So it's interesting you said that. I hadn't thought of that before. These groups kind of are the personification of this hermeneutic of continuity. It's almost like they are trying to be like a religious order. Like in the preconciliar days of the church, there were the Benedictines, and they had their special charism, and then there were the Dominicans, they had their charism. It's kind of like that's what the fraternity is doing. The Vatican II, the Reformed Church, is fine. We don't like it as much, but we're just going to do our own thing over here, and we can play a part in this whole thing. And you're saying that's missing the point.
Yes, it's definitely missing the point. And again, I'm sure there are plenty of them who would say that we're not doing that. Right. But I'm saying that based on the principles and based on their constitutions and based on the document in at the origin of their foundation, whether they want to or not, they're doing that.
Have any of them been outright proponents of what Vatican II is doing? I mean, I know you had that quote earlier where they talked about, collegiality, religious liberty, etc. But it seems like they tend to stick to, the preconciliar documents as a whole. But is that always the case?
No, and sometimes you will come across one or other of them who says something very much in support of some new thing that's going on, something strongly in opposition to the society and to our positions. For example, the district superior of the German district of the Fraternity of Saint Peter in 2017 said publicly, published publicly, the Fraternity of Saint Peter, however, has accepted to study without prejudice the conciliar text and has come to the conclusion that there is no breach with any previous magisterial statements. However, some texts are formulated in such a way as they can give way to misinterpretations. But in the meantime, Rome has already made her concordant clarifications, which the Society of St. Pius X should now also recognize. What clarifications? It's news to me. Right. It's impossible to say that these things, which are, we've pointed out and throughout this series of podcasts, that they're at odds with what the church has always taught. Mm-hmm. The monastery of Le Barroux made the effort to publicly rehabilitate, if you will, or habilitate religious liberty. One of their monks wrote a 2,000 some page study claiming to demonstrate that the Vatican II's teaching on religious liberty is in line with tradition. A few years later, another monk at the same monastery wrote a refutation. But again, it's this mentality where you've accepted it again at the root, and then you end up trying to to make the reality fit the practical situation that you've imposed upon yourself or allowed to be imposed upon you.
Right. So that's on the doctrinal side of things. Just from a stability side of looking at things, the Society of St. Pius X has always been we just looked at it in the last couple episodes about how it's not really, doesn't really have an official position within the church unless you look at supply jurisdiction. There's always been this kind of sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the Society of St. Pius X, but at least the fraternity is perfectly fine and there's no issues with their canonical position. They're not at risk at all.
Well, given the recent motu proprio, who knows what's coming down the pike for them? They're always trying to kind of play both sides. They're always walking on eggshells. They're always putting themselves in the position of being slapped down for being too traditional, which is illegitimate. The authorities have no right to punish anyone for being too traditional. You can't be too traditional.
Right. So that's, looking at the canonical position, it seems to be that they are in the position that they are in, stable within the church because they have accepted Vatican II. And that's really the only thing that's keeping them tethered, even though, again, probably a lot of the priests don't even agree with that tethering.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And, and we're not the only ones who have pointed this out. Archbishop Vigano has said the same thing, just to give a different point of view. The canonical position of the Ecclesia Dei Communities has always been at risk, he says. Their survival is linked to their at least implicit acceptance of the conciliar doctrine and liturgical reform. Those who do not conform by criticizing Vatican II or refusing to celebrate or attend the Reformed Rite, ipso facto put themselves in a position of being expelled. The superiors of these societies of apostolic life themselves end up being the overseers of their clerics, who are strongly advised to refrain from criticism and to give tangible signs of alignment from time to time, for example, by taking part in celebrations in the quote-unquote ordinary form. That's Archbishop Vigano. And again, I think that's quite accurately sums it up, is because of what they have accepted, they put themselves in that position of always having to make compromises, even if they're small things. And then, who knows what comes next? They're one of their district superiors, if I'm not mistaken, when the new motu proprio came out over the summer, effectively complained, we're treated worse than the Society of St. Pius X. But that you put yourselves in that position,
right?
Of having to try to keep one foot in each of two boats that are moving further and further away from each other. Eventually, you have to pick or fall into the water.
Okay. So these groups do celebrate the new liturgy?
I'd say probably in general, not much. Okay. But in principle, they can, and in many cases, they have.
Okay.
So, Dom Gerard, the late Father Abbot of the Monastery of Liberou, celebrated the new Mass with the Pope in 1995. Monsignor Bach, the Superior of the Institute of Christ the King, did so in 1991. The Fraternity of Saint Peter had to accept the principle of concelebrating the Holy Thursday Chrismal Mass with the bishops of the diocese in which it's established in what's called the Rocco di Papa meeting in 2000. So in principle, every priest of the fraternity has the right to and cannot be expelled for celebrating the new Mass. The Fraternity of St. Peter 2016 General Chapter said, the compromise of February 2000, authorizing the Fraternity of St. Peter to concelebrate the Novus Ordo only on Holy Thursday, was revoked, and the priests of the Fraternity of St. Peter are authorized to concelebrate the new rite as often as they wished.
Okay. And you have the same thing, right? As a priest of the Society of St. Pius X, you can say the new Mass whenever you want.
If I want to look for a new job and a new home.
Right.
And, compromise everything that I stand for.
Right.
Yeah, I could do that.
Sure. But again, this is, and we've gone through these episodes on the new Mass, and we've gone through and talked about how the new Mass in and of itself is a compromise. And even if the majority, 95% of the priests, 95% of the time are not saying the new Mass, the fact that, again, their superiors are doing it, and there's these concelebrations in the Chrismal Masses, again, it's a principle there.
Right. And they told Archbishop Lefebvre at one point, just say the new Mass once.
Right.
And you can have your approval. And he refused to do it. And because again, that it's a fundamental compromise on something that is touches a matter of faith.
So we have, there's a lot of concerns here that they are just, on the principle level, on the level of, their superiors, making these compromises. And again, I'll ask the same sort of question. Why do they stick to the traditional Mass? Why even be a part of this community if on the level of principles, they're okay with the Novus Ordo Mass? It doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, I think in order to have that official approval, to be able to say the traditional Mass, and then you just have to kind of, pretend it's not happening or turn a blind eye to the compromises. Mm-hmm. But then if you're really trying to do something for our Lord Jesus Christ, if you're really trying to reestablish his reign, if you're working for the restoration of the church, you're undermining the work that you're trying to do.
Right. So there are definitely similarities. The liturgy, for the most part, traditional Latin Mass, same exact thing that the Society of St. Pius X does.
Right.
The priests are wearing the cassock, just like you are, Father. Do they get a traditional formation, seminary training?
For the most part,
okay.
Their seminary looks more like ours than it would look like a seminary where they're teaching and saying the Novus Ordo Mass.
Okay.
They have that more structured, more traditional formation. They have traditional devotions. They promote the Rosary and devotion to the Sacred Heart and other things that have lost a great deal of popularity in the modern church. And as I mentioned, their preaching for the most part is not problematic. They teach the catechism, the traditional doctrines of the faith, and so on. So you have that apparent similarity with really fundamental differences.
Right.
The Society of St. Pius X is pointing out that there's this crisis in the church, and that it comes from these ideas that broke into the official structures of the church, if we can put it that way, at Vatican II, and that the post-conciliar reforms and teachings have simply made the matter worse, and we refuse to accept those novelties. We do whatever is in our power to expose them for what they are, which are modernist and liberal corruptions that have no place in the Catholic Church. And we do whatever we can to counter their noxious influence, right, by pointing out those errors, but also by the promotion of the fullness of the Church's tradition, liturgical, doctrinal, devotional, and otherwise. The Ecclesia Dei communities end up, again, trying to play both sides, saying that with their actions and at times with their words, that some kind of compromise between these two conceptions is possible. That there can be peace between the new man-centered conception of the church and the liturgy, which is ancient and is manifestly God-centered. And even going so far as to accept some of these explicitly these man-centered new teachings of religious liberty, ecumenism, collegiality, and so on. And again, I recognize that not every member of those communities wants to accept those novelties. But then what are you still doing in those communities that officially do accept them? And we have to point out that this approach is at the origin of the Ecclesia Dei communities, and as a consequence informs their whole existence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So again, to be fair, we've talked about several times and reiterated again here. There's definitely a lot of good work that is being done, and so the last thing I'll kind of ask you, Father, is good things being done in these groups. There are some good results, and there are some, at least on the surface, a lot of good things that are happening. And oftentimes it seems like the fraternity and the Society of St. Pius X and the Institute of Christ the King are all kind of pushing for the same sort of thing, a restoration of tradition, going about it in very different ways, but broadly all doing the same sort of thing. So there's this movement, and there's this outcry recently, hey, you two stop the infighting. Society of St. Pius X, stop fighting with the fraternity. Let's unite the clans and let's work together for this common goal. So what do you think, Father? Is there an opportunity here to unite the clans and all work together?
Well, I think the sentiment is certainly well intentioned. That if it were a matter of simple personal differences, then we could talk about
Sure.
it. But it is important to reiterate that it's not because we have some sort of personal disagreement, or it's just a matter of externals or a question of approach. But there's a fundamental divergence in our view of the present state of the church and what we should do about it. Mm-hmm. So there can't be any significant uniting unless we share that same fundamental vision. So either they change and they say this living tradition stuff has got to go. It's not a matter of the hermeneutic of continuity. The new mass is unacceptable. Religious liberty, ecumenism, and collegiality are unacceptable, right, etc. Then we can talk. Or if we abandon our principles and decide that unity was more important than holding on to them, then there could be some union, but God forbid. So we can't unite unless they change or we change. Because again, there's a fundamental divergence, and we cannot accept that what they have enshrined in their existence, their constitutions, their way of life, as being acceptable.
Mm-hmm. So
I mean, are they more on our side? Are they more to the side of Society of St. Pius X, or are they more to the side of the modern hierarchy? It's so, and I would say it differs probably from member to member. Mm-hmm. And again, there are a lot of them that are very close to us in their thinking, but institutionally, they're closer to that notion of the hermeneutic of continuity.
Mm-hmm. Even though they look a lot like what the Society of St. Pius X is doing, at the core, it's just not there. Okay.
Right, and and this is something that's not going to be apparent to the average Catholic in the pew.
So I mean, again, to be a little bit flippant, it sounds like you're just being very insular, and you don't want to accept any, you don't want to accept any fraternity, priests or people who go to these chapels to come to a Society of St. Pius X Mass, Father. That's what it sounds like.
Not at all.
Right.
They're more than welcome. The faithful are more than welcome to come to the SSPX. I know that might make them unpopular with some of their friends. Yeah. Maybe in some priests. And the priests, the religious in these communities, we're always happy to meet with them, to talk to them, to express our positions and so on. But we can't, have a sort of a more comprehensive and unity that doesn't take into account the reality of things.
Right.
And and I'm sure this is not, the differences are not apparent to the average member of the faithful in the pew. Mm-hmm. Right? That the priests of the Fraternity of Saint Peter are not preaching the hermeneutic of continuity every Sunday, right. And most of them probably don't even believe in the hermeneutic of continuity. Maybe that's too strong. Again, I don't have that personal experience, but I'm sure a lot of them don't. And what they see on Sunday is going to look very much like it does at an SSPX church. Yeah. Nevertheless, the important point here, and I think that's really brought out by the recent motu proprio, its accompanying letter, and that response from the Superior General, is that they are taking a fundamentally different approach, and that if what you want to do is just have your pretty mass in a nice church and the trappings of tradition with, some of the doctrine and devotions, then you're in the right place with the Fraternity of Saint Peter. If what you really want to do is to oppose the present crisis in the church at its root, in its causes, then where you should be is with the Society of St. Pius X. And I think, and obviously I'm going to say that that's where every Catholic should be, because this modern mess is offensive to God. It denigrates the position of our Lord Jesus Christ and of the respect that's due to him. It leads souls away from the truth and risks damning them. And that's something that cannot be taken lightly. That's something that cannot be compromised with.
Right. Well, Father, thank you so much for going through this all with us. Like you just said at the end there, they're not overtly saying things from the pulpit like the hermeneutic of continuity is great and all this stuff. And for people like me who, I go to the Society of St. Pius X Mass, and, if I were to go to a fraternity Mass, it would look exactly the same. And so I kind of sit here and go, why does the Society of St. Pius X say the fraternity is bad? It seems exactly the same. It's not immediately apparent, and that's the issue.
Right. And again, we have to, why have they been granted a canonical standing,
right, and we
have not?
Right.
What's the fundamental problem there? It's because they have accepted compromises that we say are unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it really does come down to that. And that is, anybody who's looking at it should try to examine that, in the light of Catholic truth, this acceptance of living tradition, the acceptance of the notions of the hermeneutic of continuity, the acceptance of religious liberty, ecumenism, and collegiality, is that acceptable in the light of the principles? Can you make that compromise without undermining the faith? And our position is going to be no, and the at least official position of the Fraternity of Saint Peter, the other Ecclesia Dei communities, is going to be yes. And so it does come down to principles, and it has to be looked at in the light of principles, not simply from a personal point of view. I know Father so-and-so in this Ecclesia Dei community, and he's really wonderful. I'm sure he is. And I'm not saying that he's not, but I'm saying that his there are good priests really trying to do good work in the diocesan structures who also say the new Mass, but that doesn't mean that the new Mass is good. There are good things that they're doing, but we have to make a distinction between the person and the good things they're doing and what has to be done, what really is acceptable or unacceptable on the level of principle.
Okay. That makes sense. Well, Father, thank you for taking the time to go through this again with us. And I think this is the last episode that we have you on. So again, thank you for doing all the research and taking the time to go through these episodes with us throughout this whole series. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to and watching episode 46 of our Crisis in the Church series here on the SSPX podcast. Next week, we're happy to welcome Father Michael Goldaddy to look at the Society of St. Pius X from an outside perspective, to answer the question, can I attend an SSPX Mass? Can I attend an SSPX chapel for my sacraments? There are a lot of voices saying that it's wrong, even sinful, to attend. We'll see that in detail next week. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and to the SSPX News English YouTube channel so that you won't miss next week's episode or any of our future ones. And if you have the ability to set up a monthly recurring donation of $5 or $10 or $20 on sspxpodcast.com, it would help us immensely to complete this Crisis in the Church project. Until next week, thank you for listening, and God bless you.